There we go. And perfect. All right, take two. So to celebrate this dark time and to remind ourselves about hope and what we're aiming for, we're gonna be lighting a candle together. The reason for the candle is three reasons, because I like things in three. One is to represent the coming light, the fact that it is going to get brighter. Brighter days are ahead. The days are getting longer. The sun is shining a little more every day. And this is going to be representing that. It represents hope. Hope is a really powerful, powerful emotion, powerful feeling. And that's what we're here to celebrate today. In a bunch of different ways and a bunch of different stories. We have some storytellers that are telling stories of hope from their life. They have some storytellers that are talking about myth. Some storytellers like me, I have a fairy tale for you today. So I'm very excited about that. So that's the second reason we're lighting a candle. And the third one is to represent the Hearth Fire. The Hearth Fire where everybody would, back in the day, gather around because it was the warmest spot. It was a spot that everybody would gather around during the winter, stay warm, but also be together. And we're all coming together, yeah, virtually, but we're all coming together as a community today, here in the magical land of the internet. And we're getting together to hang out and listen to some stories. So I'm really excited. So if you have a candle, I do right here, and my scary electric lighter that I have to fight with for a second, because it usually wins. There we go. I have my candle lit. And I'm gonna have this going. I see everybody else has theirs going. That's awesome. So if you have your candle, go ahead and light it and pretend that this is the hearth fire that we're all gathered around, telling stories, enjoying each other's company. Even if it's not really in person, it's still together in spirit. So thank you, thank you, thank you all for coming. And so without further ado, I'm gonna hand this off to the first storyteller, the amazing shaman at large, Adhi TwoOwls. And I'll let her introduce herself a little more once I unmute her.
I am unmuted. So.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's so nice to see everyone's face, and I'm glad we're gathering in this virtual circle. And I'm not quite sure if I have so much of a story as if I have sort of an immersion. That's how I'd like to sort of say, so this is Embolc in the Celtic tradition, and it's associated with the goddess Breed. And there's a lot of mythology around that, but she's associated with something called the forge, and you light the forge with fire, and the fire is transformative. Forge is all about taking metal and heating it up and making it malleable and hammering it and turning it into a tool or turning it into something magical. But what I would like us to do is to imagine that this forge and this process is actually more metabolic. It's something that happens deep down in the earth right now, something that's happening under our feet. It's happening under the ice and the snow and the rotting leaves that hold the sunshine and the drops of dew and the rain, all of that's frozen in time beneath our feet. And as it's down there, and it's down there deep, deep down inside, amongst the mycelium, which is frozen in the water, amongst the organic material, there are the seeds that collected all the sun and all the love of the trees and the plants and the air and all the nutrients that came up through the roots of its mother and became the fruit that eventually burst and they fell into the ground. They got lost amongst the leaves. And right now they're down there. They're down there in this sort of frozen dark. Because this is also the time. This is the time between winter solstice when we entered the dark and the equinox. We're like right in the middle, right in the place, right in the time where the seeds dream. This is when they begin to dream. Everything is still frozen, but they're slowly drawing in the nutrients of the soil around them, slowly drawing in that little bit of warmth that is beginning to trickle down as the days get a little bit longer and the nights get a little bit shorter, and the seeds begin to dream. And they begin to dream. They begin to dream because inside of them is another tree or plant or shrub or sprout of something. Everything is inside this little seed. The seed is like the singularity that began this universe. The singularity is this potential, this point in space and time. Everything exists. And it stays within that little point until it dreams itself into existence. And when it does, it begins to grow. And the seed is just like that singularity. And it will grow an entire universe. And it will draw in all of its nutrients from the mycelium and the bacteria and the organic material and the sunlight that was captured in the leaves that dropped down onto the soil that now lives under the snow that is decomposing and becoming the tiny droplets, the tiny particles of food and messages to wake it up as it begins to dream itself into being. So that's the time we live in right now. We are in the dark. We're still in the cold. We're still in the place of shadow. We're still in the place of the unknown. And there are lots of stories of mythology about going into the dark, about going into the deep. You know, there's Persephone and Demeter, and then there's Inanna. You know, so I want to bring you into the dark. I'm not necessarily going to finish the story, but I'm going to bring you into the dark. I'm going to share with you the journey of Inanna into the underworld. And maybe if we do this again, I'll bring Inanna out. I'm just going to start with Inanna going into the underworld. So Inanna is queen of the universe. You know, she births forth from herself everything in the universe, all comes out from her. And she sits in front of the Hoopa Loopa tree, the tree of life. Okay. And she's married to a guy named Arish Gagel. He's a king. And no, I'm sorry. That's her sister's name. Oops. So anyway, she's married to a guy whose name I can't remember now because he's kind of insignificant. We'll just sort of say that. But he's kind of a party boy. He's kind of a frat guy. He's rich, came from a rich bloodline. So he's like, you know, kingdom, lots of kingdoms, lots of money, lots of excess, lots of stuff, you know. But Inanna, you know, she's married to him. And she decides that she wants to go down to visit her sister who lives in the underworld. And they haven't had the best of relationships because sisters kind of have those kind of relationships that kind of work sometimes and sometimes they don't. But she thought it would be a good idea to go down and visit her sister. So she puts on her finery, her robes and her jewelry and all of that. And she makes her way to the entrance to the underworld. And she has to go through 7 gates. And she gets to the first gate. And the gatekeeper there says, well, you must leave your furs, you must leave your cloak at this gate. And she looks around and she drops her cloak. She says, well, I want to see my sister. So if this is what I have to do, I will go see my sister. And she wanders down through and she finds herself to the 2nd gate. And at that gate, they said, that is a lovely lapis necklace you're wearing, but you must leave it here. And she takes off her lapis necklace, hands it to the gate. She wanders down. You know, makes her way to the 3rd gate. And he says, you must take off your beautiful veil of jewels off your head. So she said, okay, I will take my crown, my jewel, the night sky, I will take it off my head and I will give it to you. And of course, well, Inanna is making her way down into the underworld. Her husband's up in the upper world having a party, okay? He's like lit up the castle, he's dancing, he's just having a good old time. And Inanna continues her journey down. And she gets to the 4th gate. And at the 4th gate, they say, well, you must take off your sandals at this gate. So he takes off her sandals and leaves them at the 4th. And she goes down again to the 5th gate. And the gatekeeper there says, you must take off your belt. And this belt is the girdle of our universe, the thing that creates the Milky Way. So she takes it. And she wanders down to the 6th gate. And they say, You must take off your beautiful linen dress. It takes off your beautiful. She gets finally down to the 7th gate, and she has one little hairpin holding her hair. And they say, you must leave that here. So she takes off her hairpin and lets her hair fall. And then she is allowed to go into the great chamber where her sister is. And her sister, Erishkigal, is sitting on her throne. And I go, oh yeah, it's you. Finally, you come visit me. Finally, after all this time. And, Erishkigal is not necessarily that cordial. And Inanna, is, and they have a little sort of tussle. And Erishkigal says, I've had enough, boom. And she kills her instantly on the spot. And she hangs her in that place of the in-between, the dark and the light, the life and the death. And she's hung there. And that is like the seeds right now. They're hung in life and death, in beginning and end, between light and dark. And that's where I'm going to leave you in this story.
All right. Thank you, Dee. And so here we are, hanging out between the light and the dark, kind of in the underworld in February, but we still have the second half of the story to look forward to. And I guess there is definitely a sort of hope with that too, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you, Dee.
You're welcome.
Cool. All right. Next, going from the mythic, we're going to go to a fairy tale, I believe. I'm not even really sure what this story is that Maria is bringing to us, but it is her turn.
Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here with you tonight with my little candle lit, gathered round our communal hearth fire. Adhi just gave us a nice little story about journeying down into the underworld. And the folktale that I'm going to relate to you tonight is also kind of about journeying into an underworld, but it's about journeying into your own interior underworld in a way, in that this folktale is about the courage, the bravery, and the compassion that one needs to pursue healing. It's a traditional folktale from Japan, and it's in this wonderful book, which is a favorite of mine. It's called Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. So if you're looking for some wonderful reading at this time of year, any time of year, this is on my absolute must-read list, everybody. So I'm going to read this wonderful folk tale for you. It's called The Crescent Moon Bear. Here we go. There once was a young woman who lived in a fragrant pine forest. Her husband was away fighting a war for many years. When finally he was released from duty, he trudged home in a most foul mood. He refused to enter the house, for he had become used to sleeping on stones. He kept to himself and stayed in the forest day and night. His young wife was so excited when she learned her husband was coming home at last. She cooked and shopped and shopped and cooked and made dishes and dishes and bowls of tasty white soybean curd and 3 kinds of fish and 3 kinds of seaweed and rice sprinkled with red pepper and nice cold prawns, big and orange. Smiling shyly, she carried the food to the woods and knelt beside her war-weary husband and offered to him the beautiful food she had prepared. But he sprang to his feet and kicked the trays over so that the bean curd spilled. The fish jumped into the air. The seaweed and rice spilled into the dirt, and the big orange prawns went rolling down the path. Leave me alone, he roared, and turned his back on her. He became so enraged she was frightened of him. Time after time this occurred until finally, in desperation, the young wife found her way to the cave of a healer who lived outside the village. My husband has been badly injured in the war, the wife said. He rages continuously and eats nothing. He wishes to stay outside and will not live with me as before. Can you give me a potion that will make him loving and gentle once again? The healer assured her, this I can do for you, but I need a special ingredient. Unfortunately, I am all out of hair from the Crescent moon bear. So you must climb the mountain, find the black bear, and bring me back a single hair from the crescent moon at his throat. Then I can give you what you need, and life will be good again. Some women would have felt daunted by this task. Some women would have thought the entire effort impossible, but not she, for she was a woman who loved. Oh, I am so grateful, she said. It is so good to know that something can be done. So she readied for her journey. And the next morning she went out to the mountain and she sang out, Arigato zaisho, which is a way of greeting the mountain and saying, thank you for letting me climb upon your body. She climbed into the foothills where there were boulders like big loaves of bread. She ascended up to a plateau covered with forest. The trees had long draping boughs and leaves that looked like stars. Arigato zaisho, she sang out. This was a way of thanking the trees for lifting their hair so she could pass underneath. And so she found her way through the forest and began to climb again. It was harder now. The mountain had thorny flowers that seized the hem of her kimono and rocks that scraped her tiny hands. Strange birds flew at her in the dusk and frightened her. She knew they were muen botoke, spirits of the dead who had no relatives, and she sang out prayers for them. I will be your relative. I will lay you to rest. Still, she climbed, for she was a woman who loved. She climbed till she saw snow on the mountain peak. Soon her feet were wet and cold, and still she climbed higher, for she was a woman who loved. A storm began, and the snow blew straight into her eyes and deep into her ears. Blinded, still she climbed higher, and when the snow stopped, the woman sang out, Arigato zaisho, to thank the winds for ceasing to blind her. She took shelter in a shallow cave and could barely pull all of herself into it. Though she had a full pack of food, she did not eat, but covered herself in leaves and slept. In the morning, the air was calm and little green plants even showed through the snow here and there. Ah, she thought, now for the crescent moon bear. She searched all day and near twilight found thick cords of scat and looked no farther, for a gigantic black bear lumbered across the snowfall, leaving behind deep pad and claw marks. The crescent moon bear roared fiercely and entered its den. She reached into her bundle and placed the food she had brought in a bowl. She set the bowl outside the den and ran back to her shelter to hide. The bear smelled the food and came lurching from its den, roaring so loudly it shook loose little stones. The bear circled around the food from a distance, sampled the wind many times, then ate the food up in one gulp. The great bear reared up, snuffled the air, and then disappeared into its den. The next evening, the woman did the same, setting out the food. But this time, instead of returning to her shelter, she retreated only halfway. The bear smelled the food, heaved itself out of its den, roared to shake the stars from the skies, circled, tested the air very cautiously, but finally gobbled up the food and crawled back into its den. This continued for many nights until one dark blue night, the woman felt brave enough to wait even closer to the bear's den. She put the food in the bowl outside the den and stood right by the opening. When the bear smelled the food and lumbered out, it saw not only the usual food, but also a pair of small human feet as well. The bear turned its head sideways and roared so loudly it made the bones in the woman's body hum. The woman trembled but stood her ground. The bear hauled itself onto its back legs, smacked its jaws, and roared so that the woman could see right up into the red-brown roof of its mouth. But she did not run away. The bear roared even more and put out its arms as if to seize her, its 10 claws hanging like 10 long knives over her scalp. The woman shook like a leaf in high wind, but stayed right where she was. "Oh, please, dear bear," she pleaded. "Please, dear bear, I've come all this way because I need a cure for my husband." The bear brought its front paws to earth in a spray of snow and peered into the woman's frightened face. For a moment, the woman felt she could see entire mountain ranges, valleys, rivers, and villages reflected in the bear's old eyes. A deep peace settled over her, and her trembling ceased. "Please, dear bear, I've been feeding you all these past nights. Could I please have one of the hairs from the crescent moon on your throat?" The bear paused. The little woman would be easy food. Yet suddenly he was filled with pity for her. "It is true," said the crescent moon bear. "You've been good to me. You may have one of my hairs, but take it quickly, then leave here and go back to your own." The bear raised its great snout so that the white crescent on its throat showed, and the woman could see the strong pulse of the bear's heart there. The woman put one hand on the bear's neck and with her other took hold of a single glossy white hair. Quickly, she pulled it. The bear reared back and cried out as though wounded, and this pain then settled into annoyed huffs. "Oh, thank you, Crescent Moon Bear. Thank you so much." The woman bowed and bowed, but the bear growled and lumbered forward a step. It roared at the woman in words she could not understand, and yet words she had somehow known all her life. She turned and fled down the mountain as fast as she could. She ran under the trees with leaves shaped like stars, and all the way through she cried, "Arigato zaisho," to thank the trees for lifting their boughs so she could pass. She stumbled over the boulders that looked like big loaves of bread, crying, "Arigato zaisho," to thank the mountain for letting her climb upon its body. Though her clothes were ragged, her hair askew, her face soiled, she ran down the stone stairs that led to the village, down the dirt road, and right through the town to its other side, and into the hovel where the healer sat tending the fire. "Look, look, I have it. I have found it. I claimed it, a hair of the crescent moon bear," cried the young woman. "Ah, good," said the healer with a smile. She peered closely at the woman and took the pure white hair and held it out toward the light. She weighed the long hair in one hand, measured it with one finger, and exclaimed, "Ah, yes, this is an authentic hair from the crescent moon bear." Then suddenly she turned and threw the hair deep into the fire, where it popped and crackled and was consumed in a bright orange flame. "No," cried the young wife, "what have you done?" "Be calm. It is good. All is well," said the healer. "Remember each step you took to climb the mountain. Remember each step you took to capture the trust of the crescent moon bear. Remember what you saw, what you heard, and what you felt." "Yes," said the woman, "I remember very well." The old healer smiled at her gently and said, "Please now, my daughter, go home with your new understandings and proceed in the same ways with your husband. And that is the story of the Crescent Moon Bear.
Thank you, Maria. That was really lovely. Fantastic. That was awesome. Great. And so next, we are going to have a little switch and talk about a story that is not folktale, but instead from everyday life. And so I'm going to invite our friend Jill, who is the president of the local chapter of Toastmasters. If you don't know what Toastmasters is, it's a group that is all about public speaking. I think I accidentally just asked somebody else to unmute. If I did, sorry. I was click happy. And without further ado, I'm going to let Jill take over. So the stage is all yours. Thanks, Jill.
Thanks, Isaac. Hello, everybody. I'm Jill Kimball. As Isaac said, I am in Toastmasters, where we kind of work on our storytelling and our presentations and things like that for public speaking. This story this night, I was so excited to be invited to tell this story of hope and inspiration. This story comes from my own personal life, and it's a story about what happens when you give up hope and when you finally release that which you desire. So, all right, here we go. Have you ever wanted something so badly that you are afraid to even think about it for fear that it wouldn't come true? Have you ever come so close to having that dream become a reality only to have your hopes dashed? And have you ever felt the elation of a wish coming true only to find that you were just too shocked to believe it? Perhaps we've all had these similar experiences in some way, but for me, those experiences happened about a decade ago, and they changed my life forever. I hung up the phone. I was at work and I had just finished a call with Jean from the agency I had been working with. Jill, she said, we should have something for you this month. I think it's safe to say you can be cautiously optimistic. Cautiously optimistic. But how could I be? I had been waiting to hear those words for so long. It had been a decade of dashed hopes, close calls, missed opportunities, and as a result, I had put my feelings behind a wall. I buried myself in my work and my friends and my hobbies. I just couldn't let myself go there. I had to protect myself from the disappointment that was repeating for my own sanity. Yet there was something in Jean's voice that resonated. Cautiously optimistic, she said. That was Wednesday. On Thursday, I thought I'd share my news with my coworker. What? She said. Oh my God, you have to get ready. Let's go shopping. No, I didn't want to go shopping. I said, I don't want to jinx it. You know, jinxing, when you say something before it happens and then the gods or goddesses above suddenly think you are unworthy and humble you by pulling the rug right out from under you. No, I didn't want to jinx it. I'd been there. No shopping for me. On Friday, despite the impact to my career, I thought it would only be fair to let my boss know so she would have ample time to find my replacement if needed. Jill, she said, we appreciate your candor and your honesty. We thank you for letting us know. Good luck. Whew. On Saturday, I woke to one of the hottest mornings on record. And despite it being early June, the morning temps were already in the 80s. I was hosting a yard sale with my neighbor, and throngs of people were already going through the yard trying to find a deal. At around 10 o'clock, I went in for a drink. As I approached my door, I could hear the phone ringing. Bring! Bring, bring. I heard the answering machine pick up and then disconnect. I grabbed a glass of water and the phone began ringing again, but this time it sounded louder, more insistent. Bring, bring. I lunged for the phone. Hello? Hello, dear. It was Jean from the agency. Why was she calling so soon after I'd spoken to her and on a Saturday? Hi, Jean. Oh, it sure is a hot one. Yeah, it sure is, Jean. Well, dear, we have some news and we were hoping you could come down tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Yes, dear. To the hospital. The hospital? Yes, dear, the hospital. And Jill? Yes? Congratulations. Congratulations? Yes. It's a boy. You have a son. A baby boy. A baby. I was in complete disbelief. I was not ready. I had no diapers, no crib, and no idea what to expect. Most women have 9 months to get ready, and when you adopt, you don't. In less than 24 hours, my life as I knew it was going to change completely. On Friday, I was a working woman. On Monday, I wasn't sure who I was going to be. I was in complete shock. But slowly, as the hours began to pass, the little hole in my emotional wall began to open, and I started to have hope. Set off the next morning as the hospital was several hours away. And with each mile, more emotions came forth, and that little hole just began to widen. I got to the hospital and was ushered into the maternity ward, and the doors opened on the ward, and I was flooded with warm sunshine. And a wonderful nurse took my hand and escorted me into a private room. She could see the fear and confusion and on my face, and she told me to sit right there on the bed and just breathe. Whew. In the distance, I could hear a little squeak. It's like a little wheel squeak of a cart. And as I got closer, it started to sync with my heartbeat. Squeak, squeak. Finally, the door opened and the nurse ushered in my baby. And they placed him in my arms, and in the wall that I had had surrounding me for so long just came crashing down. As I looked at him, I smelled him in the scent of springtime and apricots. I knew at that moment he was mine. I threw caution to the wind, and in its place was hope and optimism. I was optimistic for the future and what it would hold, and all the things that we would do. And at that time, all my doubts and fears fell away, and I knew who I was. I was a mom. And that was over 10 years ago. And I can't explain how it changed me as a person and who I was. And all I can say is when you have something and you have hope, and then it gets dashed, and then you let yourself release that, you open it up, you open the universe to bringing that towards you. And that's where I never thought it would happen. And I was just so surprised, surprised. So thank you for letting me tell that story. I really appreciate it. It never gets old for me. It just is amazing. Thank you, Isaac.
Oh, thank you, Jill. As this is, I've heard this story a few times because, you know, I've heard it in different settings. And Every time, like this time, I was like, all right, I know where the emotional parts are. I'm not going to get all misty-eyed. So thank you, Jill. Thank you so much for joining this and giving us your story of hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Isaac.
All right. And so next, we're going to have a little change, going from something that's beautiful and, like a good heart punch in a good way, to something a little different. So I'm up and I love fairy tales. And if you didn't know that, now you do. So today, I'm going to be telling you the story of the brave little tailor. It's not one of the more well-known fairy tales, and that's why I like it. I don't remember where I first heard it. I've been actually trying to figure out where I had first heard it this entire week, and I can't quite get it. But that's all right. If you haven't heard it, today is going to be the first time you've heard it, and I'll be the one to have told it to you. I'm going to let you know that I have changed it a little bit just because it's a long story and we don't need to hear all of his adventure. So we're going to have his adventure abridged. Once upon a time, a rather long time ago, there was a tailor. A tailor, if you don't know, is someone who sews clothes to make them fit an individual customer. Well, this tailor was a smaller man who, while being skinny and not very athletic, was nimble with his fingers and very cunning. One day, as he sat by his window sewing away, he saw a woman in the street selling jam. He thought, that would be perfect with the bread in my cupboard, and rushed right out to buy a jar. He headed to his cupboard, grabbed some bread, and slathered it with his newly bought jam. He was about to reach out for that delicious jammy bread when he realized, I should probably finish my sewing job on this coat before I start really getting into this. Otherwise, I might get jam everywhere. So before he could really get jam on his fingers, he went back to sewing the coat. But the sweet smell of that delectable jam rose into the air and grabbed the attention of some flies. They began to lazily fly towards the plate where the jam and bread lay. "Who invited you?" yelled the tailor. "Get out of here before I'm forced to do something rash." But the flies, who didn't understand English, refused to let themselves be warned off. And there seemed to be even more of them coming in. "Now you've done it," he cried. He reached for his duster and with a yell, swung it at the flies. It was a massacre. While many of the flies had flown away out the window, there were many on that floor. He counted the bodies. 7 flies lay on the ground, legs up in the air. "7!" the little tailor proclaimed. 7 in one blow. That's amazing. That has to be a record. He was filled with admiration of his own courage. The whole town should know of this amazing feat. He grabbed some fabric and began to make a sash. Across the front of the sash, he embroidered 4 words: 7 in one blow. As he placed the sash across his chest, he proclaimed, "Tell the town? No, I need to tell the world." So now that he considered his workroom way too small a field for his great prowess, he readied himself to go out into the world. After eating his well-earned jam and bread first, he put on his sash and started collecting all the supplies he needed. But he's not a wealthy man. He didn't really have all that many supplies. He looked into his cupboard to see what else was in there, and all he could find was an old piece of cheese. So he grabbed that. With nothing else in his house, he straightened his sash and out his door he headed. As he was headed out his door, he heard a rustling in the bushes. Looking in, he saw a bird that got caught in the branches. Thinking that the bird would be a good companion, he snatched the bird out of where it was stuck and stuffed it in his pocket next to the cheese. From there, he was off. He walked down the road quite merrily, singing the words, 7 in, 1 blow, over and over again. I mean, this guy was really proud of himself. The road eventually led him to a hill where there sat a giant, surveying the landscape. The little tailor went up to him and greeted him cheerfully, saying, "Good day, friend. There you sit at ease, viewing the whole wide world. I myself am out to go see the whole wide world. Why don't you accompany me?" The giant looked at the tailor, laughed, and said, "What a poor, wretched little creature you are." Tailor took it in stride. "That's a good joke," he said, as he flashed his sash at the giant. "Why don't you read about the type of man that you're dealing with here?" 7 in, 1 blow, read the giant, slowly, as giants don't have the best eyesight. The giant looked surprised. Thinking the tailor had meant that he had defeated 7 warriors in battle with one swing of a sword, the giant had a newfound respect for this little guy. He was suspicious, though. That man didn't look like a warrior. So, just to be sure, the giant decided to test him. The giant grabbed the nearest stone and squeezed it. He squeezed it so hard that water dripped out. "If you are so mighty, can you do the same?" asked the giant. "Is that all?" asked the tailor as he reached into his pocket and grabbed his old cheese. "I can do even better." The little tailor squeezed his lump of cheese until the whey dribbled down his hand. The giant stood flabbergasted, thinking the tailor had squeezed a stone like the giant had. The giant had to show up the little man somehow. He lifted a stone and threw it so high into the sky that your eyes could barely follow it. "Yeah? Well, how high can you throw a stone?" "A good throw, my friend," said the tailor. "But yours eventually came down to the ground." And without another word, the tailor reached into his pocket, grabbed the bird, and threw it up into the air. The bird, excited to finally be free of this tailor's pocket, flew away, never to be seen by another person again. "You'll see that my stone never went to the ground," the tailor smugly proclaimed. "You can certainly throw," said the giant, "but now let's see if you can carry a proper weight." With these, he led the tailor to a huge oak tree that had been felled to the ground and said, "If you are strong enough, why don't you help me carry this tree out of the woods?" "Most certainly," said the little tailor. "Why don't you take the trunk on your shoulder? I'll carry the top and branches, which is certainly the heaviest part." The giant agreed and laid the trunk on his shoulder. The tailor, though, instead of trying to carry it, he sat amongst the branches behind the giant where the giant couldn't see what was happening. And so instead, the giant ended up carrying the whole tree and the little tailor with it. As he sat behind in the best of spirits, whistling a tune, as if carrying the tree was the easiest thing in the world, the giant eventually was getting kind of tired. After dragging the heavy weight for some time, he could go no further and shouted, "Hey, I have to let the tree fall." The tailor sprung nimbly down, seizing the tree with both hands, as if he had carried it the whole way, and said to the giant, "Fancy a big guy like you not being able to carry a tree." The giant was impressed, but annoyed. "Well, you are mighty, as you've been saying you are," he said. "Why don't you come and spend the night with us in our cave?" The little tailor figured this sounded good and followed his friend, where he led him to a cave where there was other giants. All these giants were sitting around the fire, each holding a roasted sheep in their hands, eating them as we would eat hot wings. The little tailor looked about him and thought, there's certainly more room to turn around in here, more room than my workshop. The giant showed him a bed and told him, here, why don't you stay here for the night? Have a good sleep. And the giant left. But the bed was too big for the little tailor, so he couldn't get into it. But he did creep away into the corner to take a nap. At midnight, when the giant thought the little tailor was fast asleep, he rose up and, taking his big iron walking stick, he broke the bed into two with one blow, and he thought he had made an end of that little grasshopper. Remember, giants don't have the best eyesight. At early dawn, the giants went off to the woods and totally forgot about the little tailor at all. Of course, until all of a sudden, on their way back, they bumped into him trudging along the road in the most annoyingly cheerful manner. The giants were terrified. How could he still be alive? Fearing that he would slay them in retribution, they all ran away as fast as they could. The tailor was not deterred in any way. He decided to continue following his heart and walking down the road and exploring the world to see what he could see. And after wandering around for a good time, he came to the courtyard of a royal palace. And as one does, he started feeling tired, so he decided to lay down in the grass and fall asleep. As he slept, people from the town noticed him and came over to look at him. And they saw this man laying in the grass, and he was wearing a sash, and it said, 7 in 1 blow. Oh my goodness, they said. What kind of great hero is this? He was able to take out 7 warriors with one swing of his sword? This guy is cool. And so they immediately had to go and tell the king. They went and told the king about this man that they had found sleeping in the grass, this warrior that could take out 7 warriors with one swing of his sword. The king nodded and said, perfect. Fetch him for me. He is exactly the kind of man I need. So the king's messenger went and waited for the man to wake up. And when the little tailor did, the messenger said, come with me. The king wants to speak to you. Ah, said the tailor. Of course he does. And so he followed the messenger to the king. He came before the king, and the king, who was very wily, because he knew that this could go one of two ways. He could get this great and mighty warrior to help him and maybe do something amazing. And if he wasn't able to do something amazing, that's all right, because then this guy is not a liability and they don't have to worry about him joining another side. So he said, we've had a problem recently. There are these 2 giant murderous giants. They've been doing terrible things, destroying villages, burning them down, looting and killing, and just awful, awful creatures. None of my men can take them. If you go and if you deal with these giants, you can marry my daughter and have half my kingdom. It will save us. It will save so many lives, save so many villages. It's just, I can't do it, and I can't get my full army into the woods. This is certainly something that I need a hero to do. Is this something that you can do? The little tailor sat and thought and said, you know, for a man who took out 7 in 1 blow, 2 giants, no problem. So off to the woods he went, deep into the woods, late at night. And there, as he crept into the woods, he came across the 2 giants sleeping. Perfect, he said. he loaded a bunch of rocks into his pocket, climbed the tree, climbed up into a branch, looked down, and threw one of his rocks at one of the giant's heads. Whoa! The first giant turns to the second giant. Why'd you hit me? The second giant, shut up, I didn't hit you. You're just imagining things. Go to bed. Grumbling, the first giant went back to bed. Little Tailor waited until the first giant started going down to sleep, pulled another rock out of his pocket, and tossed it at the second giant's head. Whoa! The second giant said, what'd you do that for? The first giant said, what? I didn't do anything. Grumbling, saying, yeah, I don't believe you. Second giant went to bed. Perfect. Waited for them to sleep a little bit, pulled out 2 rocks. And this time, through both, he had very good aim and hit both of them on their noses. Both woke up yelling again, why did you do that? No, what do you mean? What did I do that? Why did you do that? And they started getting into a fight. They were so worked up that they started beating each other senseless. And I mean senseless. Have you ever seen a big giant fight? It's crazy. They're ripping up trees and swinging at each other. And it was a mercy and just sheer dumb luck that they didn't rip up the tree that the tiny Tailor was hiding in. It could have been a mess for the Tailor, but it wasn't. But it was definitely a mess for the giants. Finally, they hit each other so hard in the head that they did a double KO and knocked each other out senseless. Well, the brave little Tailor, very proud of himself, climbed down the tree, took out his sword, and finished off the giants. Remember, these giants were awful, awful, awful people. It's okay. He took out the 2 giants and went back to the king. The king looked at him and said, so are you going to deal with the giant problem? And the Tailor said, oh, I did. What do you mean you did? I took out the giants. He looked at the Tailor. You look pretty good for taking on giants. And it's like, oh yeah, they didn't touch a hair on my head. But let me tell you, they are looking pretty rough. The king, thinking that he has a crazy man in his hands, which he kind of does, let's be honest, says, let me send my knights and they'll check this out. And they go and they found these 2 giants, bruised, beaten, just a mess and very, very dead. And came back and reported to the king, nope, those giants are dead. He got them. And the king was so grateful that he introduced the Tailor to his daughter. And the Tailor, being very charming, won her heart over. And so they got married and they lived happily ever after. And that is the story of the brave little Tailor, and the story of what can happen when you have a little hope. And sometimes that hope is not necessarily all that realistic, but things still kind of pan out for you. There's a certain amount of faith in that story. And it's a lot of fun. And believe it or not, I shaved off about like half that story. It's a really long story, but I really appreciate everybody showing up and hearing that. Thank you. And we have one more story for the evening. And this is going to be another story about real life. And the person who's going to be telling this story is Josh. And I'm going to find where he is here. Oh, you already unmuted yourself. Fantastic. So Josh, I'll let you take over.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy that I had Isaac's story in between Jill's, because if I had to roll right after Jill's, I'm not sure what kind of shape I would have been in. So Thank you, Adhi, and thank you, Maria, and thank you, Jill. Thank you, Isaac, and thank you everybody for joining us. I want to tell you a real life fairy tale. And this real life fairy tale begins way back in 1979. Now, generally stories, as we have seen over the course of this evening, contain a protagonist and an antagonist, or a hero and a villain. I don't want to necessarily introduce you to a hero, but I'd like to introduce you to our protagonist. And our protagonist was born March 4th, 1979. This little protagonist was born to two farmers. Well, two folks from farming families. His mother was a waitress and his father was a construction worker. They were just rural, working class folks. And this little protagonist was me, and I was born in Lancaster, New Hampshire. From a very young age, I knew two things about myself. I knew that I loved scary things. I loved the vampires and the werewolves and the ghosts and the zombies. Loved it, loved it, loved it. I loved the Muppets. I loved Sesame Street, strange little creatures. And I really loved He-Man. He-Man and Skeletor, their own story of the heroes and the protagonists and the antagonists and the villains. The other thing that I knew about myself from a very young age is that I was very different from everybody else around me. From about the age of 3 or 4, I was one of those people that knew I was gay. And I knew that I liked other boys in a way that I didn't like girls. It was just part of it. And I knew that that was wrong. I knew that was wrong. For folks of a certain generation, I'll share with you a little story. And I can remember being very young, 3 or 4, in my parents' apartment in Lancaster, New Hampshire. And I remember sitting on a couch watching a TV show. And this TV show was called Simon and Simon. And it was about two brothers who were detectives. And one of them was kind of bald and he had a mustache. And the other one, to this little 3 or 4-year-old boy, I was like, wow, he's kind of cute. And I think that a certain segment of everybody here is going to think that's pretty funny. Now, at that young age, when I thought that, I also knew that thinking that was wrong. And I don't remember who or what told me that. So I'd like to introduce you to my very first antagonist, the world itself, the world of culture and society. I would talk about gay people being bad or different. The world of religion that would label me an abomination. The world of Christianity that would have an all-loving, all-supportive God, but somehow put me on a bad list for being born in a way that I had no choice over. So there starts my relationship with my other antagonist, trauma. It's taken me a really long time to realize that growing up in this world, being told over and over again by society, by movies, by religion, by people, that you're wrong, you're bad, you're broken, you're defective, you're an abomination. Those sorts of things are very traumatic. And very much like all sorts of trauma, we don't really know about that trauma until we're on the other side of it. So here I am, growing up in a world that's telling me that I'm wrong. Over the course of that, I had to protect myself. I had to survive. I had to shrink and shrink and shrink and hide and change and hide and change. And I'll tell you about another antagonist of mine, my mother. This story might sadden you, but I share it to show you what kind of world and culture that I was brought up in. I was probably 8 or 9 years old, still young enough to be playing with my He-Man figures. I loved Castle Grayskull. I loved my figures. I loved playing. And my mom, bless her heart, loved her pocketbooks, loved purses. She still does. She still has a wall of purses and pocketbooks hanging, and this woman will change them like people change their underwear, I swear. And that's cool. That's her thing, right? Always loved her pocketbooks, always loved her purses. I found a pocketbook once, just a spare pocketbook kicking around, and I decided, wow, this would be really, really cool. And I put all my He-Man figure in it. Not because it was a purse, not because it was a pocketbook, because it was like a thing to carry my toys in. And I remember walking outside my house, very happy that I finally had something that I could put all my little friends in. My mom saw me, and she did the only thing that a woman from that generation and a woman from her background could do. She freaked out. She spanked me very hard, very, very hard. And that was another time in my life that I realized I can't even touch things like that. And I didn't even mean to in a feminine way. It wasn't even like a girl versus boy thing. It was just like, hey, this is a really cool thing to carry my toys in. So that was another piece of trauma that got added onto my little story. And I grew up very closeted, very pretending not to be the abomination, very pretending not to be the thing that everybody in the world hated. Everybody. At least everybody in my world at that moment. So I grew up, I went through middle school, I went through high school, tried the girlfriend thing, could do it, wasn't really into it. Graduated high school, didn't go to college, and just bounced around from job to job. Meanwhile, still in the closet. And in 2003, I had a son. His name is Sequoia, and some of you here know him. And I was in a relationship with his mom for about 5 years. When Sequoia was 3, his mom and I separated. And as soon as we separated, I'm not sure what came over me. I think what came over me was a changing world. That antagonist of mine, that monster, was changing a little bit. People seem to be more accepting. And I also felt like I really couldn't squander this life, that I was going to live it to my fullest capacity, my fullest potential, because I didn't want to waste it. So I slowly came out of the closet. First to my friends, then eventually to my family. And I can remember telling my mom and dad, terrified. My dad didn't care, like totally didn't care. Imagine this big mountain man with a big bushy head of hair, big beard, just didn't care. My mom, though, wow, she really cared, really cared. And she told me at that time, she goes, I don't care who you have in your life, I'll never accept them. And she didn't talk to me for 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks, she didn't talk to me. So I got cozy again with my best friend trauma. I got cozy again with being rejected, one of my worst fears. I think all of our worst fears. And yet I was going to be true to myself. I was going to do my thing, right? Well, if my mom can't handle it, that's her story. That's not going to be my story. So I started to date other gay men. Let me introduce you to some more antagonists to this protagonist story. Wow. And I had a relationship here and a relationship there until I came across one of the greatest monsters that I had ever known in my life. And I didn't know it at the time because people weren't really talking about it at the time, but I got involved with a very, very, very incredible narcissist. Somebody who would gaslight me, and somebody who would always wonder where I was, who I was with, accused me of lying. And it took me a long time, again, to get out of that relationship and realize how much I'd been traumatized by it. And I think that there are also some people here that can relate to that, gay or straight, right? Narcissists, sociopaths, people that want to control us, people that lie to us, people that manipulate us, people that make us think certain things about ourselves. Yeah, I got tied up really, really, really incredibly with somebody like that. So more trauma. And then I found the strength to disentwine myself from this person. It was a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be. And didn't love this person, not at all. So that helped, right? But again, go back to that person that didn't want to waste his life, didn't want to squander this opportunity. And I became a really, really incredible trauma victim. And I responded to that trauma in an unhealthy way. I decided at that point in my life, I had a 5-year-old son, and I was working at US Cellular selling cell phones in Lancaster, New Hampshire. All the way back to Lancaster, it was just strange. It was just one of these jobs I had selling cell phones to people. And I decided at that point in my life that I did not want a relationship. The straight thing hadn't worked out for me. The gay thing wasn't working out for me. So in that moment in time, I was like, well, I'm not going to do this thing. I'm not going to go through hurt after hurt after hurt, after manipulation after manipulation after manipulation. I'm not going to do it. So I decided not to pursue anybody or any relationship whatsoever. And I focused on myself. I focused on my home. I focused on being the best father I could. I focused on that little career I had. It wasn't even really a career, just a job. And I remember having the conversation with the universe, God, creator, goddess, what have you. And I had a very clear, very, very clear conversation, because I am convinced that our universe, our world, our creator, call our creator what you want to, wants us to be happy, not to suffer. We're not here to pay for sins or to find redemption. I believe truly that our creator wants us to be happy. So I had a conversation. I said, you know what? No more of this. No more relationships. But hey, God, if you're listening, you know, I could probably use somebody healthy. And I gave them some very, very clear boundaries, right? Healthy. And could you give me somebody who didn't mind getting dirty? I had found by being in the gay community that there are a lot of superficial people, right? Yeah, maybe superficial is not the right word, but people very concerned with image and clothing and, you know, fashion, that sort of thing. And I really wasn't that. So it was hard for me to fit into the gay community. But I was like, well, you know, give me somebody who doesn't mind being dirty. Give me a grease monkey. Give me somebody who likes to work on cars or something like that. Or give me a farmer, right? I had this very clear conversation. And then I just went out about my business, right? Focus on my life, focus on my kiddo, focus on, you know, just avoiding trauma, really. And while I was working at US Cellular, I would always work on a Saturday. And I worked with this gal named Shelly. Shelly was fantastic. Shelly is one of those rare examples that I know of in this world of just a fantastic human being. Knows who she is, knows what she wants, is focused on who she is and what she wanted in this world, her own family, her own career, her own path. Very strong. And I love those strong folks that know themselves and know what they want in this world. While we were working on Saturdays, just down the street from us, the Lancaster Farmers Market was going on. And Shelly and I would take turns. She would watch the store while I went to the farmers market. I'd get my stuff for the weekend, and then I'd come back to the store and she'd go to the farmers market. And we did this all summer. And what I would do is, you know, I would go on camping trips with my kiddo and I'd go out and get, you know, the vegetables and all the stuff from the farmers market, because I love supporting my local community. I love the farmers market. I think anybody that's been to one absolutely loves them. And it was in September of 2008 when I went to a farmers market and I was hit by a train. And when I say this, I was hit by a train that was a person. There was a vendor there, a farmer, and he was a little hippy dippy. He was like wearing these worn out corduroys. He had a handkerchief on his head. He had these like gauged earrings. He had a little table and he was just selling these random vegetables. And I was hit by the train of beauty, not just the outside beauty, but when you hear somebody speak, there's an immediate sense of beauty. And I heard somewhere one time, I'm not sure if this was my dad who told me this or somebody else had told me, But it was a man who said it because they were talking about wives. And this person said, you choose your wife not with your eyes, but with your ears, right? You choose your life partner not with your eyes, but with your ears. So, you know, I had been through the ringer with some beautiful people, some monsters that were beautiful. And this person that I saw at the farmer's market, immediately beautiful. But to hear him speak, I could get this sense of not only a beautiful heart, but a beautiful soul. Oh, welcome to my next antagonist, love itself. I was taken aback in ways that I'd never been taken aback before. We like to talk about having butterflies in our stomachs when we meet our people, our partners. I didn't just have butterflies, I had damn pterodactyls. Seriously. And, you know, I think that I can, you know, carry my own and handle most situations. But this was a person that when I met him, I pretty much lost all ability to speak. And being the trauma victim that I was, I needed to play it cool, right? I would go back to the farmer's market, and being close friends with Shelly, I would tell her about this person that I saw there. It just shook me, gave me pterodactyls, not butterflies. And she encouraged me, and I thank her to this day. She goes, you need to ask him out. And I'm like, I don't even know if he's into guys. Like, what? I don't even know. No, you need to. What's the worst that can happen? He just says no, right? What's the worst that can happen? And it took her about 3 Saturdays for her to convince me to even go speak to this fellow. So one of these Saturdays, I got a little bit closer to his table, a little bit closer to his little selling area, and I blurted out one word. And some of you have heard this word before because it's a funny story. And I go up and I just say, cool, I'm so cool, right? I'm the coolest cucumber ever, right? This is the word that I said. Corn. And he, being the polite, effervescent, wonderful human being he is, he flashed that $1 million smile at me and said, good morning. And I was like, no, do you have corn? I don't know what kind of spirits or fates or what have you were at work in this time of our lives, but they were working overtime. Eventually, I got a little bit closer and closer to the table, and there was a couple of weeks of me buying vegetables that might have been overpriced. But that's a whole other story. I bought a really overpriced pumpkin once. And eventually we exchanged numbers. And it was just from the point of, hey, want to hang out? And after the first time we hung out, we've been inseparable ever since. Ever since. And I'm not a big believer in fairy tales. I'm not a big believer in happily ever after. Not in the way that we get taught that it's going to happen to everybody. I don't think it's healthy for folks to walk through this world thinking that their prince or princess charming or their happily ever after is just going to fall into their lap like it's a guaranteed thing. I learned in that moment that, yeah, when your happily ever after walks in front of you, you have to be brave enough to at least say corn. Now, what I have found is that over the course of my life, I've had a very close and intimate relationship with trauma. Trauma from being gay, trauma from abuse, trauma from narcissists and awful people, trauma from weight problems, trauma from self-image, lots and lots of trauma. And in the very first couple of years of our relationship, I did what most traumatized people do. Got their trauma all over everybody. And just in the same way that I had a narcissist in my life who was like, where are you? What are you doing? Where are you? What are you doing? I was traumatized and I was afraid. And it took me a long time to stop projecting the things that had happened to me and the worries and the fears and the trauma that were infecting me on to that $1 million smile, onto that walking miracle. I refer to him all the time as my walking miracle. So yes, trauma infected me. And to a certain degree, I'm not too shy or ashamed to say that it still does. And I think anybody that deals with trauma understands that it does affect them and infect them, and that it's something that they always have to work over. But I found in that moment, no matter how traumatized I was, no matter how hurt I was, that person saw me for who I am. Saw underneath the trauma, saw underneath the pain, saw underneath that veneer, saw underneath that guy that just said corn. He saw me for who I was, and he waited for me. He stood by my side as I worked through all my trauma, and I'm still working through it to this day. We all have to continuously work against that infection. I present this story to everybody so that they know that there is hope. That for as messed up and broken as this world can make us, there are people out there that will see us for who we are. There are people out there that will just give us love, unabashedly. And if you have it, cherish it. If you don't have it, have a conversation with whomever or whatever you believe in. And then, if you're a Prince or Princess Charming and your happily ever after walks across your path, be brave enough. Be brave enough to say corn. I believe that we are all infected by trauma. And the best medicine that will ever, ever, ever help us get through it is love. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening.
Thank you, Josh. And now that I've muted him, the pumpkin totally was not overpriced. It was a reasonable price. And, you know, just like sometimes at farmers market, things are a little more expensive. And anyway. So before we end things, I don't know, Adhi, you had mentioned the idea of maybe doing so. How are you feeling? Here, I'm gonna unmute you.
I thought it'd be good to kind of, you know, we all told some very different stories with very different characters and very different processes, etc. And thank you for voicing all of these words into stories, weaving them so we have inspiration and we can maybe see a little bit of ourselves in that. So so I thought in closing I would just sort of say, you know, we're in the dark time, but part of what makes the dark dark is light. This is what makes the light is dark, you know, and being in that in-between place is where we can dream, where we can, you know, we're not necessarily being influenced by our past or by our future or wherever. We're in this moment of sort of the fulcrum, of sort of the place where things are what resting and waiting and dreaming, you know. And we all lit a candle earlier, right? And candles are sort of metaphorical for, you know, the light, the first light. They also represent the spirit and the soul, that which lives inside of us, you know. So if you even if you didn't light a candle tonight, you can envision that there's a little flame inside of it. It's a teeny flame that's inside of you. And every time you interact with somebody, every time you engage in something, you share that little bit of light with somebody else. And so those of you who lit a candle tonight, you know, you can take that candle. When you put it out, it's now a magical candle. And every time you light it, you can light another fire with that candle, another candle with that, and you can share the light and the joy and the story and the magic of being together in the circle. You can keep passing that flame on. That's often a tradition with Bridget and her sacred ceremonial work, is that you light a flame a candle. And then you pass that candle from person to person throughout your circle, throughout your tribe, and they take care of it for a while, and then they pass it on to somebody else. And then you use that fire to light all of your other sacred fires and all of your other sacred light. So, so when we sit here in our stories and in our words and in our place, that remember we are light, and the stories that we live are important to us. That's what defines us. You know, whether it's the trauma that leads us to joy, or it's the uncertainty that leads us to a new life that we get to share that with, or the hair of the rare animal on the exotic mountain that we have to pluck to bring back to only watch it burn so we can recognize ourselves. All of those things. Or the tailor who is full of himself, but he knows enough to be lit up as the trickster. These are all things that live inside of us on many levels and whatever. So dream big, carry your flame around, light other flames, share that wisdom, share that magic out there. So I thought maybe all the other teachers might want to have, not teachers, all the other storytellers, teachers, storytellers. Maybe you'd just like to say an affirmation or something that just kind of ties together this evening. So for me, it's, dream big, because this is the time to dream big. With that, I'll pass it around.
I've been meeting all the storytellers. Oh, there you are, Maria. All right. I don't know. Maria, I guess you're next on the list. And I can tie it all up.
So my affirmation would be have the patience, the compassion, and the courage to heal yourself. Suppose goes along with my story of the crescent bear. Have the patience, compassion, and the courage to heal yourself.
Jill, if you could get an affirmation from your story, what would you do?
I think I would think about singing your song, and don't be afraid to share the most precious moments that you have, the most vulnerable moments that you have with other people, because you'd be surprised that you're actually doing a service by telling your most vulnerable stuff to others, that you're actually doing a healing of yourself, but also others can benefit from it. So don't be afraid of jinxing, that you should sing your song and tell your story.
Thank you, Jill. Josh, if there is a affirmation you want to put out there, what would you say you would do?
I'm just going to continue to be brave enough to ask for the corn. In all situations, I will find the courage and the faith in myself and this world to ask for the corn.
That is a good one. Great. And for me, oh gosh, dream big and don't be afraid to let your sense of trickstery humor shine and spice up life a little bit. And to also be proud of the little things. Sometimes it's a big deal to take out 7 flies with one swat of a duster. I haven't done it before, so I mean that's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty good hit. So that's what we got. Thank you everybody for joining us around our hearth fire. Thank you for those who lit one. Thank you for joining. Those who did not, that's all right. Thank you for joining around our virtual fires. And may you have a warm and safe winter. May your winter be filled with hope and wonderment. Thank you so much for coming, and stay warm. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.